Hey guys, welcome back to AdLib Talk, and this is my first impressions video on Elden Ring. So I've played around 20 hours of the game, a bit more actually, quite a bit more, and this game is bloody big. I will be giving you my first impressions of the game after progressing through a few parts of the game. I went through the main castle, I went through basically the whole starting area, and I've progressed a bit further into the story in inverted commas. So yeah, I've progressed through a decent chunk of the game, but it seems like from the map there is so much more to experience. I think overall this game probably has around 80 hours of gameplay, maybe even more if you extend it by doing all the extra content there is available in the open world. Now, by now, I think I have a decent understanding of the positives and the negatives of this game. Of course, I will then be doing a full ultimate review, I will call it, after basically completing the whole game and trying to do at least, maybe not 100% of the game, but as much as is humanely possible for me with my other demands. And yes, you did hear correctly. I did mention negatives because this game, unlike what a lot of people, especially pretty big reviewers, have been saying, has quite a few negatives, which I will be focusing on in my review. I think reviewers have been caught up a little bit with the hype. And yes, it's a great game. Let me be clear at once. It is a great game. Very fun. I'm enjoying my time with it, but there are a lot of small issues that I think a lot of reviewers have ignored. Also important, I will not be giving any spoilers in my first impressions video, so don't worry if you haven't started the game so far. But as always, guys, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this video, don't forget to leave a like on this video, and please do consider subscribing, as those are the two main ways you can help support my channel right here at AdLib Talk. Cheers, and let's get cracking.
Make of thyselves that which ye desire, be it a lord, be it a god. But should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices.
So, for context, guys, I am a massive Soulsborne fan. Bloodborne is my all-time favorite game, and I have played Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 for over 200 hours combined. Sekiro is another one of my favorite games of all time, so yes, I do love these games, and I do love FromSoftware. I have dedicated a lot of my time to taking on challenges in these games, as well as a lot of multiplayer, especially in Dark Souls 3. I love a lot of aspects about them: the atmosphere, the art design, the combat, the tense boss battles, but especially the beautifully designed maps. There is a lot to love about these games. Elden Ring has some of these great aspects, but it has also brought out some of the worst aspects of the Soulsborne games. Issues that I have never seen so evident before, except for maybe in Dark Souls 2, because that game is bad. But let's start off with one of the game's biggest positives. The combat is, for the most part, incredible as always. 1v1 battles, especially boss fights, are just so good. The tense standoffs, dodging and blocking combos by our opponents. For anyone who says that the combat is far too similar to Dark Souls 3, I understand where they are coming from, but I think it's more due to ignorance rather than anything, given the plethora of options you now have available. The combat system depends on your ability to manage your stamina and your understanding that once you have pressed the button, you are now committed. When you perform an action, you use up stamina, so it's incredibly important to manage your stamina and make sure you have enough to dodge out or block any incoming attacks or counter attacks. Sometimes you're better off retreating to recover your stamina and or health. Dodge rolls are an other essential element, dodges give you iframes, which basically means that you cannot be hit by the enemy for that split second of the dodge. The trick is always about dodging right before an attack. All this will sound familiar if you've played Dark Souls, Bloodborne, or Sekiro before. It is in the combos and riposte that the game changes completely. Your ability to deal stance damage to your enemies is essential for your victory. Therefore, heavy attacks and ripostes are the name of the game, since once your opponent's stance is broken, you can hit them in for a massive critical hit. There are some other interesting elements to the combat. You can now crouch and sneak behind your opponent, Sekiro style, meaning that you can take out enemies in a camp, for example, by hiding, crouching in bushes, and then backstabbing them. Your ability to jump, another element taken from Sekiro, also adds another skill which you must master, as jump attacks are incredibly effective. You will notice that some big enemies also have these weak points. Generally, this is their head, and hitting their head, for example, with a heavy attack will lead to a potential critical hit opportunity for you. So take note of these things. And don't forget Torrent. I will get into horse traversal around the map in a second, but during combat, Torrent can be incredibly useful, as you can escape from sticky situations or gain ground on an enemy when needs be. Your horse can truly completely change certain combat situations. Now, to be fair, not everything is great about the combat. There are some elements which I have long hated about it and which add up to some frustration. This game goes the Dark Souls 2 direction of more enemies equals hard in certain situations. And this is a big pity, given how the combat system works so well in 1v1 situations, but then tends to get rather awkward with 3 or more enemies facing you. Another issue with the Dark Souls combat has been facing off flying opponents. Cuff, Nameless King, first phase, Cuff, and there are a lot of flying opponents in this game. Combat on a horse is, in my opinion, also rather awkward, but this could be a me thing, as I've seen a lot of people saying they really love the combat on a horse. Then there is the camera. No one mentions the camera issues, which are once more pretty evident in this game. That erratic camera in certain tense combat situations can be so awful at times. My last issue with combat, it's a really small thing, so it's not something I'm going to take into consideration when it comes to rating, but it's the auto-aiming by enemies, especially enemy archers or crossbowmen or sorcerers, mages, whatnot. How is this outdated mechanic still in the game? Nonetheless, for the most part, combat works really well, and to be fair, we all knew that, right? Because combat in a Soulsborne game is going to be incredible. But what about the open world? So we do have a massive map to explore here. A lot of reviewers have been talking about how this is the best open world game of all time. And yes, it is a very, very, very good open world game. But the best, thinking about games like Witcher 3, like Red Dead Redemption 2, like Skyrim, I don't know. Now, to be clear, big doesn't always mean good. Take Ubisoft games, for example. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the map does feel a little too empty at times for my liking. Now, this might be just me wanting more of the same from past, especially Dark Souls and Bloodborne games. But I feel like there is a lot more skill when creating the memorable map design of something like Dark Souls 1, for example. Not 1 centimeter of that map was wasted. It is all there for a reason. I truly miss the experience of finding a shortcut and discovering an old bonfire you had used 30 minutes ago. The interlocking map design with Firelink Shrine at the center was just so impressive. Now, let me repeat, that's not to say I didn't like the open world available here. I think there is a lot of good in it. There are some very interesting boss battles to fight. For example, a particular dragon fight at the start, which should have been incredible, but was ruined due to bugs and glitches, which I will talk about in a bit. But conceptually, the fight was incredible, the music going on and the dragon just flying down, shooting fire at me. Conceptually, it was incredible. The dungeons are incredibly fun. Unfortunately, there is no interesting map design in the majority of these dungeons. They are simply a straight line directly to the objective, which is a pity. But fortunately, at least, there are some very interesting enemies to fight and a lot of great loot to be discovered. Another issue I have with the open world is just how samey it all started to feel after a while. I started off quite impressed with just how vast and epic it all looked, and the Elden Tree just adds a certain mystic element that fascinated me. 10 hours in, and I'm still looking at the same color palette and the same vegetation, which looks horrible in the game for some reason. Finally, I have to comment about traversal. It's great we have a horse. The map is clearly designed to be traveled and traversed by it. The mechanics available here are great, and I do love traveling atop a torrent. Unfortunately, when it comes to traversing, that's pretty much the limit. There's no climbing, no swimming, and this is a big limitation for a game released in 2022. Visually, I must say that I have not been entirely convinced with what I have seen. On the positive side, many of the enemies you face just look absolutely incredible. The bosses I have fought, specifically the main bosses, just look so good. There is a certain element of horror to their design, which I just love. On the other hand, most locations, I have to be honest, just look incredibly boring. FromSoftware have gone for the usual European fantasy setting here that worked quite successfully in the Dark Souls series, and this has meant that the game has gone for the usual green-brown tinge, which we, or at least I, have been far too accustomed to. Again, this may be a me problem, but I really do miss the beautiful setting of Japan from Sekiro or the decrepit Gothic city of Yharnam. Both of these settings looked incredible and offered wonderful variety and atmosphere. I do feel that the world of Elden Ring is lacking in that aspect. There is so much more to talk about, both positives and negatives, but this video is already far too long. Customization in this game, brilliant. You can approach situations in a variety of different ways, based especially on what kind of build you go for. I personally selected a quality build for my opening character, as that would and will allow me to test out a lot of different weapons. But it seems like FromSoft have also invested a lot of time on improving sorcery and magic in the game, and admittedly, from videos, it does look really good. I must also say that yes, there are a large number of NPCs in this game when compared to other FromSoftware games. Unfortunately, so far at least, there are no memorable characters here. Think about characters like Solaire, like Eileen the Crow, or Sigmar of Katarina. At least, as I said, so far, I have not met anyone who is remotely as interesting or as memorable as them. The soundtrack is okay. It has some good moments, but again, nothing memorable or nothing that will stick to my head like the Lady Maria soundtrack. Now to conclude, guys, I do fear my first impressions video has been more on the negative side. I will admit I was incredibly hyped upon seeing all the 10 out of 10 reviews rolling in. Unfortunately, what seems to have happened is that a new patch at the release of the game has created some game-breaking stuttering, which is experienced usually in the open world sections of the map, such as in the opening area where you fight the Tree Sentinel. I also experienced a lot of stuttering in areas in Stormvale Castle. The stuttering is quite bad, and I sometimes felt like just quitting the game with how much stuttering was going on. Now guys, it's 2022, and it is rather unacceptable in my opinion that such a horrible PC port has been developed. There are many issues I have experienced, not just stuttering. There's the vanishing invisible enemies, there's the game crashes once or twice during boss battles, and quite a few times during the open world section of the game. dying after dropping down with torrent for a very, very short distance, bosses glitching out, specifically the dragon boss early on, your horse torrent glitching out and floating in the air then dying, and that is not to mention the lack of support for higher than 60 frames per second. Seriously, we are capped at 60 frames per second in 2022, as well as no support for ultra-wide monitors. These are things that are absolutely unacceptable in 2022. FromSoftware, unfortunately, have given little to no attention to the PC port of the game, and it shows and it feels when playing it. So guys, that's it for today. Elden Ring is a great game, but it has far too many issues right now for me to recommend it, specifically if you play it on PC. With regard to PlayStation and Xbox, I cannot tell you about the experience, but from what I have read, the experience is a bit better. Not too much though. I do feel like reviewers have ignored a lot of negative aspects that this game has, especially when comparing it to previous games released by the same game developers. I hope that through my first impressions video, I have given you a good impression of what kind of game Elden Ring is and whether it is for you or not. With regards to ratings, I will take my time with it, but for now, I'm sitting at a 3.5 out of 5, which could be pushed up to 4 if the PC port issues are solved. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed this first impressions on Elden Ring. If you did, don't forget to leave a like on this video, and please do consider subscribing. Cheers, and I'll see you guys next time right here on AdLib Talk.